Hey, just wanted to jump in here really quickly before we get into the episode. I have a new workshop coming up on November 8th, and it is called Hormone Alchemy. That's right. It's all about not just addressing the physical body and making sure that we're nourishing and supporting what's going on in the physical body with your hormones, but also making sure that we are addressing the mind, the emotions, and the spirit. I know that kind of sounds a little wonky, especially if you're new here. And here's the deal. One of the things that is the most powerful thing that I ever did for healing endometriosis, healing my migraines, as well as addressing other chronic issues that I had going on at the time, it was not just supporting the physical body, meaning doing the supplements, doing the diet things, making sure that we're eating foods that support our well-being, making sure that we're sleeping well, making sure that your gut health is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing, and also making sure that you're supporting your liver to be able to process out those hormones and we're not getting anything backed up. All of those things are super important. And we're going to talk about all of that inside of this training. But also, the thing that made the biggest difference for me was also addressing how I was ignoring my needs and I wasn't meeting them. I wasn't setting good boundaries. I was constantly thinking about other people and making sure that they were happy, especially if it was in especially if it was at my own expense. I was constantly thinking about what other people needed, all of these things. And also, I repressed so many emotions. All of these things are so important when it comes to healing and changing our health. We have to consider all of it. And that is why this is called Hormone Alchemy, because it is going to be a workshop where I'm going to walk you through every single step to balancing your hormones, reconnecting the mind body connection, and looking for the root cause of your hormones, because your hormones are not a root cause of your symptoms. They're responding and reacting to other things. So if you're finally ready to get off of the health roller coaster, if you are ready to shift from burnout and exhaustion and feeling anxious and chronically stressed to really feeling inspired and loving your life and really ultimately creating the health that you know is possible for you, but you're just getting looped into the same kind of cycle over and over again, trying to find the next thing and the next thing to help you heal, I'm going to show you how to get off of that roller coaster and that hamster wheel. And I'm going to also show you how to self-regulate and how that has a direct impact on your hormones. And not to forget, we're also going to look at labs. We're going to look at functional labs that will actually show you what's going on with your hormones and also how we look at what's going on with your hypothalamus, your brain. We're going all the way there. You're going to get it all in this workshop, and I cannot wait to get into it. If you want a stronger immune system, if you want balanced hormones, if you want more energy, you'll fully understand how it's all connected. I can't wait. Make sure to go to the bio or the show notes and get the link to sign up and save your spot. And I cannot wait to see you there. Okay, enjoy the episode. All right, hello, welcome back to the Dr. Kirsten Show. I'm your host, Dr. Kirsten Lauritsen, and today I have a very, very special guest with me, a naturopath who actually used to be my doctor back in the day. Dr. Emma Andre is with us. She is a naturopathic doctor, and we're going to talk so much more about what she does now because it's just wildly cool. But before I get into that, Dr. Emma, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited. I'm really trying to contain my excitement for this conversation. Would you like to introduce yourself? Like, who are you? How did you get to what you're doing? And we'll start talking about ketamine as a way to transform, as to a way to help us work through trauma, as a way to help us create mental health. So I'll give the floor to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. And this is a topic I'm really excited to share about. My journey has been an interesting one. And over the last few years, coming to ketamine therapy has really been this sort of um, a way in which a bunch of scattered puzzle pieces throughout my practice before have all finally come together into a picture that makes sense.
Mm.
So when we met, I had a primary care practice in Portland that I ran for 10 years, Cornerstone Natural Medicine. And when I dove into naturopathic medicine, I just kind of opened my doors. I wanted to see anything and everything, babies to elderly, and just learned a ton. I took insurance, did the general thing with, functional holistic medicine. And towards the last 5 years of that practice, started really zeroing in on supporting moms, because that's what I was. I had my daughter right after medical school and became extremely fatigued after she
Mm.
came around. Surprise, surprise.
Mhm.
I had I had just being a like a type triple A
Yeah.
perfectionist. I
Yeah.
had just finished my undergrad. I was pre-med. I was a Division I lacrosse athlete. I pushed myself as far as I possibly could, and I totally wore myself out. And then I worked a year full time as an anesthesia technician, and then
Oh.
jumped into medical school, and then had got pregnant 3 weeks before boards. Like we were like, we're going to do this right away. It was very much
Oh.
planned. And then promptly got super nauseous and laid out on the couch for months.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so having her and then trying to build my practice at the same time, it was definitely challenging, but I think I kind of always had this inner drive, like I can do this, I
Yep.
can power through this.
Yeah. Yep.
um
Mhm.
and I did it. And I looked for resources at that time for fatigue for moms, and there really wasn't anything out there. So I was like, there's a hole in this market that I'd like to fill. So
Yeah,
I
there still
built
is. Mhm.
There still is, yeah. As
Mhm.
I started building Vital Mamas,
Mm.
which was the first iteration of what I thought I was going to be doing, and then gearing my practice more towards stressed out, overwhelmed, tired moms with all the physical things that we expect to see: the hormonal imbalance, the sleep issues, the gut issues, the mental health issues, depression, anxiety, all that, the skin stuff that all tend to go together in one pretty package.
Yes. Yes.
And built that, poured blood, sweat, and tears into it, and was so excited about launching it. And then every time I went to launch it, some personal thing in my life fell apart, like a
Mm.
major thing. And we went through 4 massive traumas all in a row. Lost my dad to pancreatic cancer, and then we had someone in the family who attempted suicide. My husband was the one who found and resuscitated them, and then going through the fallout of that. And then my mom had had brain damage and from a medical incident, and I ended up becoming her caretaker.
Mhm.
Whereas previously she was helping me raise my then 2 kids. At that time, I
Mm.
had my son as well.
Mhm.
And then I turned into a caretaker for my kids and for her. And I was running my practice, and I was trying to keep her acupuncture practice alive at the same time.
Oh, wow.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
um, and then so we were just in this place where it was just really difficult for us. And we had a friend who was in the world of psychedelic medicine who came to us and held space for us. And we had such a profound experience with
Mm.
that. And it really shifted my whole perspective, gave me a grounded sense of I need to make a big change,
Mm.
and decided that we were going to move to Carlsbad, California. And this was January 2020. Flew down, put an offer on a house, got jobs lined up in this clinic and at this resort where it was just like this sort of the dream jobs we'd always wanted. We were so excited. And
Yeah.
then COVID hit, and we had already committed and wanted to leave Portland. So we moved down, our jobs disappeared, and then it was COVID, and then it was all the things that had to do with that was really, really challenging, and it was just a
Yeah.
challenging financial place. And
Yep.
then 6 months in, we're like, finally things are opening up, those jobs kind of started to slowly come back.
Yep.
And then 2 days before Thanksgiving of 2020, my mom was out hiking 10
Mm.
minutes from our house in this very public park, and became the random victim of a violent homicide. Just wrong place, wrong time. Um, and getting through that, not knowing who the perpetrator was for about a month, being terrified that we were like being targeted by somebody. We had no idea. Like it
Mm.
was scary to go to the mailbox, and taking, and when that happens, when they don't know who it is, you're the first person they investigate as the potential perpetrator, which is
Mhm.
just another level of awful to have
Mhm.
police going through your home, your financial documents, taking your phones, your computers, and being a suspect in something that is just unconscionable.
Yep.
Um, Again, our friend flew down and held space for us
Mm.
with psychedelic medicine. And we were in a dark, dark place at that time. And I mean, my kids are real young. They were like, was I kindergarten and fourth grade at that
Mhm.
time?
Mhm.
And um, though that being held in that at that time, it completely shifted everything. It was like
Yeah.
a seismic shift, not only to get us out of this dark hole that we were in, but just really shifting my whole perspective on me in that hard situation.
Mhm.
And once again, we got clarity that we could not stay where we had moved to, that we were going to move again. So we did, and came back up to Bend. And we decided this time to buy a lovely farm property outside of town with
Yeah.
some acreage. And it was so peaceful. And we knew that we were going to do some healing there and then hold space for other people. And out of that was born Medicine Within, which is the
Mhm.
company that we run now. After going through all of that, it became really clear that the world of psychedelic medicine was where we belonged because of how potent it was. My
Mhm.
husband's also an ND, and we had always both been most fascinated by mind body medicine, the connection
Yep.
between everything, as you know, the not just the nervous system, but how is it that our view of ourselves, of the world, and how we operate in the world dictates and really defines our physical health.
Yep.
And this was a place where all of those things kind of came together.
Mm.
And with ketamine therapy, this is something that actually combines all of those levels, and a lot of people don't think of it that way.
Mhm.
But being that we had spent the last 10 years, like all of the CE that we didn't really make sense for primary care. I would go after like holistic counseling, and I was
Yep.
so interested in energetic medicine and homeopathy and flower
Sounds
essences and
like
these
mine.
things. Yeah, right. It's like just this grab bag of things. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
it, but I don't know how this fits in. And it was just
Yeah.
years of that until finally ketamine came into the picture, and now it makes total sense.
Mm. That's
Yeah.
so amazing, like, just to kind of see all the pieces come together finally, for so
Yeah.
like, I say this all the time about myself and my own certifications and things, but I'm just like, this has been quite a journey of seemingly random things.
Yeah.
But when they finally come together, it's a really cool place to land, I feel like.
Yeah.
Um, well, I love it. I mean, obviously that I think, like, obviously the story of how you got here is difficult, to say the
Yeah.
least. But I feel like that's how we oftentimes end up doing the things that we do as
Yeah.
practitioners.
Yeah.
So so for people who maybe have some hesitancy, or
Mhm.
are just like, wait, what are you saying? What are you talking about? Ketamine? Like, what are you
Yeah.
what is this? Let's talk about how does it work? If it sounds like it's very similar to other psychedelic um methods that you could use. So can you go into how it works?
Yeah. It's helpful to understand just a short bit of history of where ketamine comes from, being that it's just kind of coming into the news and we're hearing about it from uh, various well-intentioned good angles and then some not so good angles. I think people are getting really polar pictures of what it is, but not knowing the like where it really comes from. So ketamine is an anesthetic and an analgesic. This means that it can help put people to sleep for surgery and other medical procedures, and it blocks pain. It was invented in the 1960s in order to replace PCP, or angel dust, as it's called on the street, which is what they used to use, but it left lasting psychotic effects. So they had to find something different that worked better and didn't have those lasting effects.
Mm-hmm.
So ketamine was born as a cousin to PCP, though it has very, very different impact. And it has been used since 1970 in surgery, in medical procedures that require pain blocking all over the world. It's on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. It's used on babies and children and adults and the elderly, on animals even. And so it's a really common medicine. And what they noticed over time was that there'd be people who'd go into surgery who had depression who would come out on the other side with significantly improved symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until the late 90s that they actually started studying this. So they ran the first biggest study in the late 90s at Yale. And then since then, they've been amassing a lot of data. The issue with doing research on ketamine is that ketamine is a generic. So there's not going to be a ton of money to be made with ketamine as a generic drug. So whenever there's not a lot of money to be made, there's not generally as much focus. It's a little bit harder to get funding to study something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So generic ketamine is what a lot of people end up using. Something else, if you've been in the world of reading about ketamine, you may have heard of Spravato. Spravato is a nasal spray in which they took ketamine, which is in biochemical terms called an isomer. It has an R and an S. If you remember your organic chemistry, it has both sides. And they took out the R and they left the S for S-ketamine, which is the same thing as Spravato, put it into a nasal spray, decided to use that and got that FDA approved. Generic ketamine is not FDA approved, but it's used off-label for mental health. With Spravato and esketamine, it's I don't know how to say this. I'm just gonna say it's not as good as generic ketamine. It doesn't. I know a lot of studies are sort of painting it in a different light, but if you really go down the rabbit hole and look at the research, generic tends to work a little bit better when it comes to mental health. Esketamine is a little bit better at pain blocking.
Got it.
But that's not typically what we're looking for. People do get benefits from esketamine and it's covered by insurance. Unfortunately, it's really taxing on the insurance system because it is really expensive. It's like $800 a dose versus a generic, which is, even if we get it compounded, like $60 a dose. But if you're getting it in a vial, it's like $6 a dose. So we're paying a whole lot more for something that's not necessarily as effective, and it makes it more accessible to more people. So, so that's a little bit about ketamine's history. How it works, you're going to see a lot of different ideas about how it works. And there's some main theories that we believe are mainly responsible. We're still puzzling out exactly how it's helping people from a biochemical perspective. What we do know is that it impacts glutamate receptors in the brain, and it helps to release large amounts of BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which in layman's terms is a little bit like adding Miracle-Gro to help connections that have been lost to regrow. So ketamine essentially makes it easier for people to learn new things. It makes it easier for them to do what they're doing with therapy and any other methods that they're using and make progress. And while some people will have a ketamine treatment and feel significantly different, like sometimes within hours, I've seen people go from acutely suicidal to not suicidal anymore. Which, if you're going to do that with an SSRI or any other traditional antidepressants, you're waiting weeks.
Yeah.
And that can be the difference between life and death.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a really big part of it. It on the biochemistry side, basically releasing a lot of BDNF, making it so the brain can regrow lost connections. And why that's important is because in depression and in anxiety, that is one thing that we do see when we look at what's different about the brain of somebody who's experiencing depression, anxiety, is there tend to be fewer connections, fewer pathways, fewer choices, and people have a higher likelihood of having repetitive or ruminating thoughts.
Right. On a different note, which many people will that listen to this, they'll have heard me talk about this many times, but it's essentially this what we're talking about is what I talk about, which is when we rewire the brain. Like the brain is, we call it neuroplasticity, where the brain is plastic, meaning that it can, at any time, you can create a new neuron.
Mhm.
And so what can happen is that when you and I we've talked about this several times on past episodes, but when if you have a lot of these pathways that you were just talking about as far as like the thoughts that we can have, the beliefs that we can have, they can become these like Autobahn highways that are just
Mhm.
fired so quickly. We have the potential, though, with many different tools to be able to start breaking that pathway down and rewiring to create a new one. And that is the coolest thing about the brain is that for so long we thought that the brain was like not creating new things. It was just like static
Mhm.
and then eventually that was the end. But that's not the case. And we know that not
No.
only do we have this with the ability to change the brain, to rewire the brain, but also there is this whole thing that's going on with the immune system and inflammation and all of these things that are all tied together inside of like what makes mental health. So for any of you that are kind of like wondering how it all connects. It does.
Yes, it does.
And that's why all of this can be so incredibly powerful when you
Yeah.
have tools that are able to put all of those pieces together. Um, I don't know if you would describe it this way, but what I've heard in the past is like one of the differences between ketamine versus like another psychedelic, let's say plant medicine, is that ketamine, and this is similar, I think, to what you just said about people coming out of anesthesia and then not having that like depression anymore. Um, I've heard it described that like for someone who is experiencing depression or very like well, trauma would be another one, just like these really
Mhm.
strong experiences, thoughts, that ketamine when you go in will help to um make it so that like you don't necessarily have that thought coming out on the other side, whereas like with
Mm.
psychedelic medicine it doesn't, or sorry, they're all psychedelic. With plant medicine or other methods, medicines that you can access this kind of same experience, that you can go in, but you may have those thoughts coming out on the flip side, which can make the journey a little bit wonky and hard to once you come out on the other side, which I've heard for many of my friends who have done different
Mm.
journeys, that it kind of really changed so much about their life that then on the other side they kind of had this big like they had to change everything about their life because it was just
Mm.
really tricky to integrate on that flip side. I don't know if that's how you would explain it, but that's how I've heard it explained before.
Yeah. Um, I have like three different thoughts coming
Okay.
up that I want to say to that. So I'm gonna see if I can remember them.
Okay.
The biggest, one of the biggest things that I think is helpful to describe to sort of back up a little bit in terms of what you're talking about of the benefits of what's
Yeah.
really happening. I laid out the physical chemical benefits, but
Mhm.
there's a whole other side to ketamine and another side to other psychedelics. And I'll sidestep for a minute to say that some would argue ketamine is not a psychedelic only because it's not considered a classic psychedelic because it impacts
Sure.
different receptors. But if we
Sure.
define psychedelic as mind manifesting or giving you a journey that allows you to see inside of yourself, inside of your mind, into places that are otherwise blocked or difficult to get to, then it is very much a psychedelic experience. So that's the definition I use in case you're getting caught up on that if you're in the world of psychedelic. So, but one of the huge benefits of these journeys, and this is all substances that are providing an actual journey. Not all substances do, but if we're comparing plant medicine and ketamine, they both do in a different way. Is that what we believe is happening when you go in is that you're taking a deep dive into your own subconscious, particularly with ketamine. It's
Yep.
a lot like diving in and looking into a big old mirror
Mm.
and getting to see based on what your intention is going in. And that's really important, getting things shown to you about where you're actually stuck.
Yeah.
So, and this, it helps to share what I share with every patient. And sometimes lands, sometimes doesn't land, but it's really important. People come in because they feel like this. And really, they want to feel like this.
Mm.
They're at point A, they want to be at point B.
Yep.
And they believe, based on what they've read or what people have told them, that ketamine will magically transport them from feeling like this to feeling like this,
Got it.
or that mushrooms will, or
Right.
whatever substance they're
Something
taking.
level. Well, that's
We
kind of how
want
humans are, aren't we?
it, right? We want the magic cure that
Yeah.
provides a passive experience where we could just go right in and
Mm.
have the new me come out on the other side where I magically feel like this.
Yeah.
And really what's happening for most people is they come in feeling like this, and they are shown what is standing between point A and point B.
Yeah.
The journey is showing you, well, there's an obstacle here and there's an obstacle here. Address these, and then you can take yourself from point A to point B, which to me is so much more empowering than, oh, this magical medicine is going to fix you or cure you. And that's not
Yeah.
really what's happening. So
Sure.
I think that's really important, in that we're really coming up with the blocks. How different substances show you what those blocks are. That's really, I think, one of the key differences.
Got it.
So
Okay. That's a great way to explain it.
yeah, yeah.
I love it.
And the experience itself is different, right? Like if you take
Mhm.
mushroom, if let's compare mushrooms because psilocybin's an easier one, right? If you take them
Yeah.
and you don't alter them in any way in terms of how they're metabolized when you take them, you're looking at a 6 to 8 hour journey. Ketamine is about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on how you take it. I use oral ketamine with my patients, but there's people also who do IM injections or infusions, or like with us, ketamine, the nasal spray.
Sure.
I prefer oral, but that journey is essentially taking people into a space within themselves where they get to look at, what are my obstacles, and they can get more resourced too. And so
Yeah.
how things show up really varies for different people.
So key.
Yeah, but oftentimes the benefits with ketamine, when we're talking about trauma, for example, that you brought up, is that
Mhm.
we can revisit our story, whatever the story is around our trauma, and now create a more neutral relationship with the trauma.
Yep.
So if there's something we've been feeling really stuck in, feeling really victimized by, feeling like
Yep.
there's this thing and it happened and it was awful and it shouldn't have happened, and I'm angry about it, I'm sad about it,
Mhm.
I don't know how to shift this. The
Mhm.
ketamine journey can give people a new perspective of, yeah, that happened,
Mhm.
and provide compassion. Like, it wasn't my fault. It happened. I was a kid. I couldn't have done anything different. I didn't do anything wrong. It can provide a more neutral, compassionate experience, allow us to reconnect with our body, with our heart space, with, in the way I like to talk about it, is with true self with a capital S.
Yeah.
There's a model in therapy that makes so much sense in terms of how ketamine works, and it's called IFS, or internal family systems.
Mhm.
People who go to an IFS therapist and then do ketamine work, it's just like, it's such a great way to explain what's happening. I don't have to dive into it deep here, but it's that's a cool lens through which to view what's happening in the ketamine space, which is that we're really having our some of our parts, or those voices inside of our head, they are coming to the fore, and we're becoming more aware of how these parts are guiding our behavior and are guiding our beliefs,
Mhm.
and getting more in touch with our true self, that heart-centered space. Having more contact with that helps us to build more compassion for ourselves in whatever it was that happened, and to
Mhm.
to reframe that story, to rewrite that story with that neuroplasticity that you're talking about.
Yeah, okay. I'm just gonna like quick thing and then and we'll keep going. For those of you that are listening, like IFS or like what I'm trained in, which is neurolinguistic programming, very, very similar in the sense that like when we were talking about parts, I don't remember which episode it was, but there have been episodes I've talked about parts. Essentially, like along the way when you're growing up, we can learn things about ourselves like, "Oh, I'm too loud," or, "Oh, I'm too much." or, oh, I'm not good enough, or any of
Mm,
the things. And what can happen at that point is we start to fragment parts of ourselves and we start making all these little compartments. And then what can happen is those parts, because we start creating all of these fragments, what actually can happen in the physical body is it starts to create health things that go along with those parts. So this is how all of this can start really being connected when you start looking at how the physical body health things can manifest from things that happened in our past and growing up, and they get stored in the subconscious mind. When you're able to bring those parts together into the whole, now as you're mentioning, you talk about the true self. I would say that's kind of like when we're looking at things and seeing how our behaviors are kind of like patterns or like conditioning, where we grew up and it was always that way, or you can't even remember a time where you didn't have perfectionism or these people pleasing tendencies, or not being able to hold boundaries, right? Or even just do something that's like
mm,
good for you, like for your health, and what you need. All of those are like patterns and like conditioning that we can learn, but we can also relearn something new. And these are the things that
mm,
I love to talk about, because I think we in many I know that like my understanding and like how I've even experienced therapy in the past is that, yes, it's great in the sense that like we can gain a lot of conscious awareness of, well, like what happened. But what I love about some of these other techniques is that not only do you get that, but then you also get these new learnings about it. And that to me is then what creates the change in the brain that then, as you mentioned, it then turns into something in our external world. We get to actually see
mm,
how our internal world, when we heal here, it projects, it creates something different in the outside world. And that is like literally how people can change their life. And you get to choose it. You get to create it, which is like,
mhm.
I just love it. Um, okay. So I love this. This is like I love everything about it. You talked about some of the benefits of it. Are there
Mhm.
other benefits of ketamine and these like transformational and also the integration journeys that you get from it?
Yes. Um, I will add to what you were talking
Yeah,
about with
please.
parts that one of the most important benefits, I think, of where ketamine can be super supportive in our relationship to parts is these parts that we develop, they're not bad.
Yeah.
They're actually very natural, right? They're like a very natural thing of being a human. Everybody has
Mhm.
parts. I have
Yep.
parts, you have parts, we all have parts. And the key is,
Yep.
how well do we know these parts? What is our communication with these parts? And do we understand what protective role the part is trying to play?
Yep.
And part of what the ketamine journey can offer is a connection to these parts and understanding them, having more compassion for the ways in which they're trying to keep us from getting hurt again,
Hmm.
and then helping us really be connected with that self, that true self with a capital S, so that we can communicate from that place with our parts from a compassionate, loving perspective.
Love it.
So yeah, so that's it's huge,
Mm.
and I agree with you. Like that is where those monumental shifts can be made in our
Yeah.
relationship to ourselves, and then therefore our physical health, because
Mhm.
the body is just this beautiful uh, reflection of what's going on inside,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
In so many ways. And so yeah, so there's that. And then as far as the trauma piece too, this is relevant to that conversation.
Mhm.
Something really interesting that ketamine can do is it can help people to reconnect with their feeling body.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is I mean,
Yes.
how many women who've had, physical or sexual abuse do you know who are completely disconnected to the point of,
Yep.
I mean, it, abuse is so common.
Mhm.
It's way more common than I ever thought going into medicine, right?
Mhm.
And it really impacts people in many ways, but it can make the body feel like a place that's not safe to be.
Yep.
And so trauma can cause this disconnect. And I'm pointing to the collarbones because so often it's like this living in the head and not having any sense of, like, you might ask somebody, like, where does it hurt? And they're like, here, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yep.
Like there's just
Yep.
not this connection because for so long it was not safe to be or feel the painful things that were in the body.
Right.
What ketamine can do in a very beautiful and gentle way is to help reconnect those sensations. So I'll have women who've had maybe these body image issues, for example, since
Yep.
they were very young,
Yep.
and do not trust their body. They do not think their body is on their side.
Yep.
They feel like they're constantly fighting their body.
Yeah, I had that one.
And then their journey can be about having this beautiful reconnection, this very sensorial experience of like, oh, that's right, it feels so good to be in my body. I want to take care of my body. I love
Mhm.
my body. My body deserves to move, deserves to feel really good, and to have good food, good nourishing food.
Mhm.
um, and so people can really shift their relationship with feeling, which has, as you know, a trickle down effect on everything. If we can't feel our body, we can't listen to our intuition, because that's where
Right.
it comes from,
Right.
which is some of our most powerful abilities to feel what's right for us come from that place.
Yes. And you need it as a parent.
Yes.
Mhm. You
As a
need it.
human being.
Yes. Like
It's true.
all of the things. Mhm.
All the things. So that's
Mhm.
one thing. And then another thing that's maybe a little more subtle is that working with ketamine tends to help people create, and as I kind of like to explain it, insert a little bit of wedge of time between stimulus and response. So whenever there's things that come in that are triggering, before ketamine, when people are really struggling, sometimes they'll feel like, something will happen, someone will say something, and then the brain will just go to like, like this angry response, and it
Yeah,
there's
it's
doesn't feel like there's any choice.
right, it's very fast.
Very fast.
Mhm.
What ketamine can do is help slow that process down by inserting a little bit of wedge of time, giving people space to make a choice, so that it is now a response versus just a reaction.
Yep.
And it seems so subtle, but that can also create some huge shifts in how we're able to navigate our relationships with ourselves and our relationships with others, and
Yep.
help us to kind of slow down and be more present.
Yeah. Mhm. All the
Yeah.
things that we talk about here.
Thanks. Yeah.
I love it.
And another
Love it.
benefit
Mhm.
is that it can help us understand ourselves better. So
Yeah,
um
right.
here's a good example of where all these things kind of come together. I had a patient many months ago who came, who was on the outside, high functioning woman in a very powerful position in a company.
Yep.
From the outside, you would never know. But
Mhm.
inside, she was struggling with huge anxiety and
Mhm.
episodes of depression that would kind of come and go, and a lot of very deep seated questions about her sense of self worth. It was very much tied to her success and things on the outside.
Yep.
And this was kind of putting her into this life of chaos with her emotions. And after her journey, and this is somebody who had done over 10 years of talk therapy, which was very
Yeah.
helpful,
Mhm.
but didn't quite make the dots connect in the way that
Yep.
she wanted.
Yep.
She sat up after her first ketamine journey, took her eye mask off, looked at me, and goes, I am worthy.
Yeah. Yep.
For the
I
first
am.
time, she felt it
Mhm.
in her body.
Yeah.
So that's really different from cognitively, intellectually knowing, yeah, yeah, I'm worthy, I've checked all the
Yep.
boxes.
Yep.
Knowing it in your heart and feeling it is totally different. And that's one of those ways in which it can connect us to our body, connect us to our understanding of ourselves, and help to heal things just on a totally different layer
Yeah.
than talk therapy.
Yep. Yep. All of which, like, we talk about this a lot, but like all of the things are great. And like everything has its own benefits and its own thing. And there's more oftentimes that we can do, and things can serve us in different ways. So all
Yes.
of it is good. It all is good.
Yeah. And it's really important when working with, you were alluding to this earlier. It's really
Mhm.
important when working with any substance, particularly ketamine, that in order to have a fruitful experience with lasting sustainable results, which is what everybody wants, you don't want to just keep having to go back and take it again and again and again. That gets
Yep.
expensive and isn't actually moving you forward. is to have proper preparation going into it, knowing why you're engaging with the medicine, being really clear on your intention. And this is something that a provider who's offering more of what we call the ketamine assisted psychotherapy model versus the anesthesia model of here's a medicine, just let it fix you kind of model.
Yeah.
If we're truly offering that full experience, we're doing deep prep. The
Mm-hmm.
person should know what they're going to feel, what they're going to see, what they might experience, how to navigate that space, and how to pick how to pick an intention, an anchor that they can come back to when they're in that space. During the journey, there should be really great support, right? They're not left alone in a room with a screen that they're staring at, which is how some clinics work.
Mm-hmm.
There's discussion about what does it look like, and does that person want like physical support with a hand to hold? Are they, what's going to happen if they want to talk about something?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen if they don't want to talk about something?
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, integration.
Yep.
Integration is talking about what happened in a journey, pulling out all of the sequences, making sure they're all written down, and then talking about them,
Mm-hmm.
and discussing what did that mean to that person. And then, most importantly, what do we do with it? How do we make that actionable in your life?
Yeah. Yeah. I will say it again and again. The integration piece is oftentimes neglected in a lot of like transformational experiences, but it is one of the most important pieces that I think should be there. But anyway, that's it is. I think it's well, it's how you determine where you're going to go with it. So I love to hear it. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to add that we didn't talk about today? I feel like we explored a lot of like the really great pieces of what ketamine can do for people.
Yes. Um, yeah, I think one of the questions I get a lot is, um, what is the experience actually like?
Hmm.
And the way that it's done in different ways. I can only talk about the way I do it. But during the time when the person is in the space with the medicine after they've taken the ketamine and when it's doing its thing and they're having their journey, the
Yeah.
way we set it up is people have an eye mask on and they have noise canceling headphones on with ketamine specific music. And it's set up as a very internal journey.
Hmm.
And this is really lovely. So for some people, this is a very visual experience, but with eyes closed. Ketamine does
Sure.
not make you hallucinate, but when your eyes are closed, it can be sort of like lucid dreaming. Anything from just fractals, lights, or patterns to full on, I'm flying through a Disney movie kind of a visual
Sure.
going on in front of their eyes.
We could.
And then oftentimes it can feel like your body's doing something really different in space than what it's doing. Sometimes it'll feel like you're being gently rolled in the sheets, or like you're going up in an elevator, or like really slowly your feet are rising above your head, which is sounds like such an odd sensation. That's typically just in the beginning of the journey.
Hmm.
Um, and generally speaking, it's a lot like lucid dreaming with music, and the music is the second guide. It
Hmm.
will be like a chapter change for every part of that journey. The journey tends to be very abstract. It can be things that are familiar, it can be things that are unfamiliar. And there is sort of like an expected curve of that experience of like feeling like someone's really deep in the journey and then coming out of it again. And there's really important potential insight in all parts of that journey. So it's important that person be allowed to have that full experience. But
Very cool.
I share that too because I work with people one on one. I also work with people in small groups. And small groups to some people feel really intimidating, but the fact that you're in your own
Bubble.
little visual
Yeah.
bubble and with your own music kind of helps to show how benign it really is, and how I believe that healing with other people, healing in community,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and having connection and being seen in that process is so important. And that's part of what we're trying to build, is to break away a little bit from this model that is just the
Yeah.
one-on-one in a silo with your one provider.
Yeah.
and open that up to community healing too.
Yep. I don't wanna hijack it, but that is one of the reasons why I created a group experience was because what I realized is when I was in group experiences, I was listening to all of the other things that people were
Yeah.
saying, and sometimes something that I didn't know I had was like, "Well, that's definitely me. I've got that one," and it was just and you also get the friendship, you get the also the, like, "Oh, I'm not alone in this?" Like,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
experience that too, like, and there's so much healing that
Mhm.
happens in those spaces, and I love that. So love all of it. Dr. Emma, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
Um,
you for having me.
yes. Where can people find you? I'll put it all in the show notes, but where can people find you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, you can find me at medicinewithin.com. We are located in Bend. So if somebody wants to do an in person experience, they can come to Bend. We do work also virtually with anybody in the state of Oregon. And if you want to find out whether you're a candidate for this kind of a treatment, you can go to our website. If you want to read more, we got lots on our FAQ page. But if you go to the homepage, any get started button, then that will take you to a link to schedule a totally free, zero pressure 25-minute intro call that I have with everyone to make sure it's a good fit before
Mm,
they sign up for any appointments. And then also you'll find us on Instagram at Medicine Within Oregon is our
awesome.
handle there. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, I hope you all enjoyed that because I did. So, all right, well, we'll see you for the next episode. Take care.